Domingo Germán's perfect game against the Oakland Athletics on June 28, 2023 was the first perfect game in the MLB in a long time. The last time it happened was 2012. The gap between 2023 and 2012 was the longest we'd gone without seeing a perfect game since the gap between Catfish Hunter's 1968 perfect game and Len Barker's in 1981. But who threw it in 2012, you ask? That would be none other than Felix Hernandez, the topic of today's video. One of the best pitchers of the 2010s, King Felix was a Cy Young Award winner, 6-time All-Star, held the best ERA in the league twice, and accumulated more wins above replacement as a Seattle Mariner than Randy Johnson. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Cole from Philadelphia Media, and today we're going to be getting into the life and career of former Seattle Mariners ace Felix Hernandez. Felix, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated and underappreciated pitchers to ever play the game of baseball. If at any point you enjoy what you're watching, do me a huge favor and leave a like to show that you support the content. Also, consider subscribing to see more videos like this. Feel free to leave a comment about your thoughts on the video and any suggestions for what I should do next. On to the video. Felix Hernandez's baseball journey started at a very young age. A Venezuelan native, Hernandez first began noticing people watching him play at just 14 years old. Once young Felix was told these attendees were scouts, he started throwing the ball as hard as he could when he was on the mound because he liked those kinds of challenges. When he turned 16 years old, the Seattle Mariners, Atlanta Braves, and New York Yankees offered him contracts. The Mariners offered him a contract with a signing bonus of $710,000. It was said that the Yankees and Braves offers were higher than that, but Felix ultimately picked the Mariners because of the relationship he developed with them. Seattle general manager at the time, John Engel, along with scouts Pedro Avila and Emilio Carrasquel, the latter of which being a member of a legendary Venezuelan baseball family, cultivated a strong relationship with Felix and his family. It also helped that 15-year-old Felix watched the 2001 Seattle Mariners win 116 games, the most ever in MLB history. A member of that pitching staff was Freddie Garcia, another native of Venezuela and someone who became an idol for Felix. The Venezuelan ties to the Mariners and a hefty signing bonus were enough to draw Hernandez to Seattle. The other aspect that sealed the deal was the Mariners told him he wouldn't be sent to the Dominican Republic, that he'd be sent right to the minor leagues instead. Felix and his father, Felix Sr., were adamant about not wanting him to play in the Dominican. When he signed his contract on July 4, 2002, the Mariners immediately brought him to Seattle to hang out with the team and get to know his future teammates. One player who took Hernandez under his wing was Freddie Garcia, the pitcher he admired so much and partially convinced him to sign with Seattle. 17-year-old Hernandez arrived in Everett, Washington for the 2003 season, where he began his minor league career. After sporting a 2.29 ERA and a 7-2 record across 11 appearances, he was soon promoted to Wisconsin for low A ball, where he had a 1.93 ERA in just 2 starts before the season ended. It was during this season he'd earned the nickname that stuck with him for the rest of his career, King Felix. The popular Mariners blog USS Mariner wrote, "All hail King Felix," in their brief July 17, 2003 write-up, expressing their excitement about the youngster's hot start to his professional career. Felix was always one of those guys who fans referred to by his first name. It was always Felix or King Felix, the same way LeBron James is typically referred to as LeBron and not James, or how current Mariners star Julio Rodriguez is frequently called just Julio, but it's not like that at home. Felix's full name is actually Felix Abraham Hernandez Garcia. I'm no expert on Spanish surnames, but my research tells me that it's common to have your father's last name first, which is Hernandez, and your mother's second, Garcia. His blood relatives call him Abraham or Papi, not Felix, and certainly never King. In a 2015 article in ESPN's magazine, Felix admitted the nickname made him uncomfortable at first. His parents taught him to never look down on others and that everyone was equal. That's sort of the opposite of what a nickname like King implies. Not to mention, Felix was struggling with the huge cultural shift of moving to the U.S. His hometown of Valencia, Venezuela, was nowhere near Seattle, over 4,000 miles away, and Felix was a 17-year-old kid who hardly spoke English. He'd watch cartoons in his hotel room hoping to pick up some English phrases, and he'd call his mom every day to tell her about his struggles. She would tell him, "You decided to do this, so you have to pay the price. Now go out and be good." Good was an understatement for what he'd go on to do in his career. 2004 saw him pitch in High A and Double A, where he went 14-4 with a 2.95 ERA, 1.20 WHIP, and 172 strikeouts and 149 in the third innings pitched. By 2005, the 19-year-old was the number 1 pitching prospect in all of baseball per Baseball America and number 2 overall, behind future MVP and former number 1 overall pick, Joe Mauer. He started the 2005 season in AAA, where he went 9-4 with a 2.25 ERA and led the Pacific Coast League with 100 strikeouts despite pitching just 88 innings. He pitched so few innings because he missed about a month with a shoulder injury and soon after was called up to the Seattle Mariners to make his big league debut. Even still, he won PCL Rookie of the Year and PCL Pitcher of the Year. Felix made his MLB debut on August 4, 2005. At just 19 years and 118 days, Hernandez was the youngest player to pitch in an MLB game since Jose Rijo in 1984. Sporting number 59, Felix allowed just 3 hits and 1 earned run in his MLB debut across 5 innings, but was unfortunately still handed a loss. Felix made 11 more starts that season and went at least 7 innings in 10 of them, going 8 innings in 4 of them and throwing 1 complete game. Felix's ability to eat innings in his rookie year was just a precursor for the rest of his career, where he'd always be among the league leaders in innings pitched. He finished his rookie season with a 2.67 ERA, 0.996 WHIP, and a 4-4 record. Despite young Felix's efforts, the Mariners were not very good that year at all. They finished the season with a 69-93 record, last place in the AL West. Felix pitched in just 11 games but finished 5th on the team in WAR with a 2.8. That offseason brought on a disagreement between Felix and the Mariners. The 2006 World Baseball Classic was that March, and Felix wanted to represent his home country of Venezuela. Felix Hernandez's name even went as far as being placed on the roster, but the Mariners appealed it. GM Bill Bavasi spoke about his concern of putting too much stress on the 19-year-old's arm. It was quite the dilemma. In the U.S., for whatever reason, we don't really care too much about the WBC. At least our players don't. But for other countries, such as Venezuela, it means a lot. Therefore, Felix felt it was very important to represent his native country. The Mariners eventually won the appeal, and Felix would not be competing in the tournament. Felix was a large dude. At 20 years old, he stood 6 feet 3 inches and weighed north of 230 pounds. In 2006, he showed up to spring training in a fashion that was described as pudgy and out of shape. He also struggled with shin splints in spring training, delaying his ramping up process. But something new with Felix was his number. He was wearing number 34 in honor of his favorite Seattle Mariner, Freddie Garcia. Garcia was with the White Sox at this point. 2006 was a disappointing year for the King. The Mariners stayed consistent with their idea of not putting too much stress on his arm. They limited him to a maximum of 200 innings. He hit .191, but went 12-14 with a 4.52 ERA. The Mariners finished last in their division again. Even with his poor season and the Mariners limiting his innings, he still led the team in wins and innings pitched. During the 2007 offseason, Jeff Baker of the Seattle Times wrote a profile on how Felix Hernandez spent his time off from baseball. He wrote about how Felix lived in his parents' house with his mom, dad, girlfriend, daughter, brother, brother's girlfriend, and brother's daughter. It provided a look into how he spends his days as a 20-year-old living in a Venezuelan home with 7 others, waking up late, doing chores, playing with his daughter, etc. Despite having more money than his family had ever seen, Felix wasn't living like a high roller. His bed for him and his girlfriend was a foam mattress shoved next to a twin so they'd have more space. His mother wouldn't allow him outside of the house by himself, and he spent most of his days sitting on their locked-up porch. He insisted he wasn't famous. It's a really interesting piece, and I'll actually link it in the description because I thought it was a brilliant look into the personal life of Felix Hernandez. But this article raised concern for some fans and people in the media at the time. While it provided a telling look into his life, it also painted him in a poor light at times. "All I do all day is sleep and watch TV," Hernandez says with a shrug and a grin. "I don't even want to think about baseball. Sleeping and watching TV, that's what I want to do." He talked about his infatuation with basketball and how he'd always hoped to play in the NBA. Baseball, women, and beer. Those were the only things Felix and his friends cared about, he told Baker. He left us with this final sentiment. "I didn't play baseball because I wanted a different life. I played baseball because it was fun. I enjoyed it. It wasn't about having money. It wasn't about wanting to live somewhere else. I like playing baseball, so I play. All I wanted to do was play and have fun. And that's what I'm still doing. So for me, I'm very happy. I don't need more." Truly an everyday man. Those who were critics of the profile were concerned about his rather laid-back off-season program. But the Mariners trainer Rick Griffin later explained that the ball club told Felix to go home and relax for a bit. They were still trying to preserve his arm and body and didn't want him working hard all off-season long. They wanted him to reset a little. Soon after that article was published, Felix began his workout program and came into spring training in good shape. Thanks to the shape he was in and new approach to the offseason, the Mariners decided Felix would not need an innings limit in 2007. The team also announced he'd be their opening day starter, the youngest since Doc Gooden in 1985. In the season opener, he went 8 scoreless innings and struck out 12. You gotta imagine those off-season discussions about baseball, beer, and women helped him out on the mound that day. His next start would be at historic Fenway Park, where he'd be facing the daunting and eventual 2007 world champion Boston Red Sox lineup. He'd be matched up with Boston's highly touted Japanese signing, Daisuke Matsuzaka. King Felix turned 21 3 days prior, and hurled a complete game shutout, allowing just one hit in Seattle's win. He got injured in his next start, and the Mariners were cautious again, holding him out for about a month. Felix finished the season 14-7 with a 3.92 ERA and 165 strikeouts and 190 1/3 innings pitched. Seattle won 88 games that year, finishing second in the AL West, but still missed out on the playoffs. During the 2008 offseason, Seattle signed starting pitcher Eric Bedard, and there were high hopes for the Mariners and the Felix-Bedard 1-2 punch. Unfortunately for the Mariners, those expectations didn't come to fruition. The 2008 Mariners lost over 100 games. Bedard pitched decently but got injured in July and missed the remainder of the season. 2009 was when King Felix finally arrived. He turned 23 early on in the 2009 season and got off to a 4-0 start in the month of April with a 2.38 ERA. He had a start in May where he allowed 6 runs on 11 hits and had 5 stolen bases against him. Seattle manager Don Wakamatsu criticized Hernandez after the game, questioning Felix's ability to step up for the team. King Felix clearly took it personally because from that game on, Felix Hernandez went 15-2 with a 1.92 ERA, 161 strikeouts, and a .215 batting average against. He won AL Pitcher of the Month back in June when he had a 3-0 record and a 0.93 ERA. He finished second in AL Cy Young voting that season, only to Zach Greinke, and made his first All-Star Game appearance. He hit career bests in wins, ERA, strikeouts, and innings pitched that season. His 2009 season served as a slingshot to his 2010 season. Prior to the 2010 season, Hernandez and the Mariners agreed on a 5-year contract extension worth $78 million. Looking to build off their 85-win 2009 campaign, the Mariners traded for Cliff Lee, who had a fantastic run for the Phillies in the previous year's World Series, and signed Chone Figgins, who was an All-Star. Ultimately, these moves provided little help to Felix. The offense was poor and frequently provided Hernandez with no run support. In 10 of his starts, the offense was either shut out or held to 1 run. But that didn't stop King Felix from having the best season of his career and finally showing everyone why the Mariners signed him as soon as he turned 16 years old. Hernandez went just 13-12 that season, but led all of baseball with a 2.27 ERA and an AL best 249 2/3 innings with a 1.057 whip and struck out 232 batters. He also led the MLB in hits per 9 at 7.0. During this historic season, Felix racked up accomplishments like striking out 4 batters in an inning and becoming the 4th youngest pitcher in MLB history to reach 1,000 strikeouts. Despite all these accomplishments, his Cy Young candidacy was questionable. After all, it was 2010, and people still subscribed to the outdated way of thinking, that wins were the most important thing for a pitcher. Felix had just 13 of them, compared to his counterparts David Price and CC Sabathia, who had 19 and 21, respectively. That being said, his astounding numbers, such as the league-leading 2.27 ERA and his 7.2 WAR, which was far higher than Price's and CC's, earned him his first Cy Young Award. David Price finished in second, and he said that he thought Felix deserved it. He also said if Felix played for a team like the Yankees, he'd get more wins and things would be different. I'd have to agree with Price on that one. Shockingly, an All-Star appearance is not something he earned during his Cy Young campaign. But the next year, 2011, he made the All-Star game. That's about the only thing he had going for him that year, though, as he regressed to a 3.47 ERA. He still struck out 227 batters and threw 233 2/3 innings, which were both top 10 in baseball. The 2011 Mariners weren't much better than the 2010 installment. They lost over 100 games in 2010 and lost 95 in 2011. So how'd they follow that season up?
Now, what are you going to do?
Felix was great, but the Mariners still sucked. Same old, same old. During the 2011 season, the Mariners created King's Court. It was a series of sections by the left field foul pole where fans could purchase tickets that would give them a yellow t-shirt and a K to hold up when Felix struck a batter out. King's Court helped connect the fans and Felix to each other, as if they didn't admire him already, but it showed their appreciation for the Mariners' ace. Felix admitted he was a bit nervous about it when he first heard the idea, but he eventually started to love it. There was a lot of love between Felix and the court at Safeco Field on an August day in 2012. King Felix took the hill against the Tampa Bay Rays that day and absolutely dominated. Personally, this was one of my favorite baseball moments I've ever experienced. I wasn't there, and I'm not even a Mariners fan, but for some reason this always stuck with me. Maybe it was because there hadn't been one since. Maybe it's because I felt bad for Felix. Maybe it was because I always felt Felix was underrated and underappreciated. That if he played in a big market for a team like the Yankees, as David Price alluded to, that he'd be viewed with the greats like Clayton Kershaw and Justin Verlander. Maybe it's because play-by-play announcer Dave Sims' call was so good. No matter what it was, this final pitch will always give me chills.
The Seattle Mariners, Felix Hernandez, the 2-2. He got him! years, 119 games. It's finally happened. A perfect game by a Seattle Mariner. It was done by the King, Felix Hernandez.
Felix threw the 23rd perfect game in MLB history and the first in Mariners history. A Cy Young in 2010, a perfect game in 2012, the Venezuelan kid who had scouts watching him since he was 14 years old, had now not only cemented himself as a major part of MLB history, but also the greatest Mariners pitcher of all time. It was his start after that one that connected Felix with Seattle forever. Every fan was given the yellow King Felix shirt and the strikeout sign. When asked about it, Hernandez said, "That right there is why I never wanted to leave. That's why I want to win here." After finishing with a 3.06 ERA, league-best 2.84 FIP, and 5 complete game shutouts, fueling him to a 4th-place AL Cy Young Award finish, Felix inked a 7-year, $175 million extension with the Mariners. At the time, it made him the highest-paid pitcher in MLB history. It was an interesting move, to say the least. He could have forced his way out of Seattle via trade or left when his contract was up. He could have gone to a contender with a lot of money and gotten the same contract. But loyalty mattered to Felix. He had been attached to the Mariners since he was 16 years old, and that wasn't going to change. That year, he recorded his 100th career win and made his 4th All-Star game. He finished the season with a 3.04 ERA in 204 1/3 innings and had 216 strikeouts. 2014 was Felix Hernandez's return to owning a sub-3 ERA when he had a staggeringly low 2.14 ERA. That was the lowest ERA by an American League pitcher since Pedro Martinez all the way back in 2000. He also led the league in WHIP with a 0.915, which was the lowest by an AL pitcher also since Pedro in 2000. During the 2014 season, Felix had a stretch where he went 16 straight starts, going 7 or more innings and allowing 2 or fewer runs. Pure dominance. This is the longest such streak in MLB history, as he broke Tom Seaver's record of 13 straight games in 1971. Unfortunately, Hernandez finished second in AL Cy Young voting for the second time in his career, this time to Corey Kluber. Felix had a better ERA and WHIP and threw slightly more innings but allowed way less hits. A potential deciding factor could have been when they went head-to-head and Kluber got the 2-0 win, but that's not really fair considering the Mariners still were a really bad team. He made another All-Star game in 2015, his 6th of his career and 5th straight, but that was pretty much the end of King Felix's reign. He began dealing with injuries in the 2016 season, and honestly, I don't think it's fair to rule out the possibility of him just being fed up with being on one of the worst teams in the league for over a decade. David Schoenfield of ESPN once said Felix might be the unluckiest pitcher of all time. When his career was over, he had a total of 52 games in which he gave up either 1 run or no runs and didn't get a win. In a nutshell, the story of Felix Hernandez is one of the most talented, underrated, while also unluckiest pitchers of all time, and one of the worst teams of all time. Hernandez played out his contract with the Mariners to the conclusion of the 2019 season. He then bounced around in the minors with the Braves and the Orioles and hasn't played baseball since. He technically never announced his retirement, but he was inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame in 2023. Felix Hernandez, one of the greatest pitchers of his era, never got to pitch in a playoff game. He never really got to pitch in many big games because his team was never contending. But Felix has no regrets. He's proud to be a Seattle Mariner, despite the negative connotation it may have. Seattle was a city that took him in as one of their own and raised him for 15 years. A first-place Cy Young finish and 2 second-place finishes later, Felix Hernandez will go down as one of the best pitchers of the 2010s and one of the best to ever put on a Mariners uniform. I hope this video informed you or even reminded you of just how good the King of Seattle was. If you've made it this far, please leave a like on the video. If you like this kind of content, subscribe and leave a comment. Thanks for watching and see you next time.